Hi everyone, and welcome to our live stream. Just wanted to make sure that everything was running well before we started the stream, and it seems to be working okay. Welcome again to our live stream going around the world from 11:30 Central European Time, Spain that is, on what I think is going to be the longest weekend of the year in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. And so what does that mean? In the longest year of Formula One, endless number of races, blink and you miss them almost. At least we got a 2-week gap between the Canadian Grand Prix and the Austrian Grand Prix, coming up at the diminutive, small shadow of its former self Red Bull Ring, which is basically just a square, isn't it? A few corners in there, quite interesting corners, but it's just it's a square with great viewing facilities for the fans on site that is inevitably designed just to have close racing. Basically, it's all about racing, racing, racing. Nothing about finesse in Austria. Well, it's not strictly true. I think going into the last corner, when the curb issue was there, I'm not sure what it'll be like this year, was always quite an interesting thing. But yeah, lots to talk about, I think. And thanks for joining us. And thanks for joining us in advance if you haven't yet logged in, but you will be shortly. Looking forward to your questions. Before we get on to that, just wanted to show you this lovely picture painted recently by Martin Tomlinson, one of our friends. He used to race Formula Ford, actually. Good man, really good guy. And he's painted this lovely rendition of Yoken Rint, Crystal Palace, a circuit that was effectively owned by Yoken Rint in a way. I mean, other drivers, Roy Salvadori, Jim Clark, obviously laid claim to it. But Yoken made his name at Crystal Palace in 1964. And there he is winning, or in the Lira Team Lotus. Beautiful car that was, actually. I've forgotten how nice a car that was in 1970. His last appearance, of course, at Crystal Palace. He did race at the British Grand Prix in July at Brands Hatch, but then sadly lost his life at Monza in September 1970. So a poignant picture of Yoken, lest we forget the great Yoken Rint, and details of how you can buy either the original or prints of that in the details below this video when it sits on the YouTube channel after the live stream has finished. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Nothing else to say other than that there's a lot of emails coming in about the festivities at the British Grand Prix around the 75th anniversary of Formula One. I think we need to really clarify that, the Formula One World Championship, because of course Formula One and Grand Prix racing existed long before Silverstone 1950. But nonetheless, a big occasion coming up for the British Grand Prix, which is the weekend after the Austrian. And lots of emails coming in about what we can expect that weekend and all the interesting stuff that's there. I've opened a few of them, and they sort of range from a new grandstand name, Lando Grandstand or whatever, to the DJs that'll be doing the music and some of the live appearances. Don't see many references to, and we found the great-great-great-grandson of Giuseppe Farina, who will be there on hand to accept a special award on behalf of his great-great-great-grandfather who won the race, or relatives of Fangio that will be there, or Fagioli family will be there if they still exist. All the things that you'd really want to see, you know, all the drivers and the history of those drivers who raced in that 1950 British Grand Prix. I'd like to see them absolutely foremost in everything that happens at Silverstone at the British Grand Prix on the 75th anniversary of Formula One. Of course, it would exclude all the Ferrari drivers because Ferrari didn't even appear in that race. I wonder what they're going to say about this. 75th? Oh, well, unimportant. We weren't there. Actually, so, you know, quite often we get apologies from governments of various countries for things that have happened in the past. I wonder whether Ferrari will issue an official apology for not having taken part in the opening Grand Prix of the World Championship. I think they should, don't you? I mean, why? It was only over spat over money, for sure. And the other thing, I'd love to see a lot of credit given to Earl Howe, who was a very fast racing driver pre-war, but became very well connected politically. And it was because of his non-stop work in ensuring that the King and Queen would be present at the British Grand Prix 1950 that the FIA said, yeah, in that case, I think we'll give the honour of staging the first round of the championship to the United Kingdom and not France, which was the next race, of course. And that was a big thing because France had been pretty pivotal in the development of motorsport since the turn of the century. And here was upstart Britain with its reused, World War II airfields, suddenly staging the opening round of the new World Championship. All credit to Earl Howe. And I hope, therefore, that there's a massive and tasteful celebration of Earl Howe's career at the 75th anniversary British Grand Prix as well, because without him, that race wouldn't have happened in the way it did. And the King and Queen were there. And there were a lot of, it was odd that it was the King and the Queen, wasn't it? Because when we had the Queen, Duke of Edinburgh wasn't the King. But anyway, that's part of British legal nuances. But they were both there, as was Princess Elizabeth and her sister Margaret, all there. Amazing when you think about it, in a sort of scaffolding little grandstand. And yeah, big crowds, massive crowds at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So let's remember those people. It should be about people more than cars or anything like that, I think. And it's all those people that made it happen in 1950 that we should be remembering as we go forward. So that's that. Yeah, Canadian Grand Prix. We've talked a little bit about that. Talked a lot about it, actually. I spoke quite a lot about it with Cameron as well. Got quite fired up. He fired me up because he was saying that quite a lot of people are critical of Lando's personality and whether it suits that of a Grand Prix driver. And nothing against Cameron, of course. That wasn't he was just the messenger. But I think it was Nico Rosberg who's been kind of implying that. And I think to try and change your character of any human being, let alone a racing driver like Lando, is absolutely ridiculous. And that got me quite fired up. And then I'm also still wound up, I know, by the whole Derek Warwick thing. I think he'll be in service and duty at the Austrian Grand Prix, actually, as a steward. But Derek is one of the best guys I know in motor racing. And to see him being asked to stand aside purely because he said the FIA made the right decision in Spain. What was that all about? Anyway, just crazy. So let's have a look and see how we're going with questions coming in. Yeah, it seemed to be, here we go. Eduardo Melendez. Let's get the box up. Here we go. Edgardo, Melendez. Hi, Peter. Thanks for all these years. So many videos, information, and good times. God bless and Godspeed. Well, thank you very much. It's very kind, and it's very, very nice for that to be the first message. Powell M asks, hi, Peter. All is well. Do you think Robert Kubica, if he did not have his rally accident, would have been a Ferrari driver, and what would he accomplish? Yeah, I do. I think he was super skillful, still is super skillful, obviously limited in Formula One terms with what he can do behind the wheel, but what a fighter he is, and so pleased he won Le Mans. I see the fourth place car has just been disqualified for some sort of flexi wing thing, not the other Ferrari, so you can't say it was a sort of Ferrari thing, but it's quite interesting, isn't it? That's shifting across to WEC now as well. But yeah, Robert, really, really good, and it's so sad that he that happened in rallying, because I think that's part of his vocabulary, that his car control and his judgment and his finesse was so good that he couldn't resist, taking part in, I guess they were what we call today Rally 2 cars, and Skoda, I think he was in, and it was just unlucky. He was on a very fast tarmac bit of road and hit the guardrail, and it was not good guardrail, and it just sort of ripped the car apart. Very unlucky, because he was quick in rallying too. He's a very quick racing driver, Robert Kubica. Got a lot of time for him. And as I say, it's just a happy ending now, because he's kept going. He never gave up, and he's kept going. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It is odd, isn't it, that when you get guys like Heikki Kovalainen and Robert for that matter, going rallying, they tend to favour tarmac events. And I find that strange, because in reality, their car control and their balance lends itself just as much to gravel, if not more gravel. And I think it's a shame, that they do go tarmac racing, because it's quicker. There's more chance of injury for sure. And very sadly, we lost one of the young Italian drivers in the Polish rally last weekend in the test, when he went off and hit a tree. His co-driver was okay. I think it was a Rally 3 car, I think. And I'm in areas I don't know here, but I don't think the survival cell regulations are anything like as tough in Rally 3 as they are in Rally 1. So that was very sad, but fast tarmac event. And I've said from day one, since my renewed interest in rallying, if you like, that rallying to me is much more about gravel. There's so much tarmac motorsport out there that we don't actually need to see the rally cars going through, tree-lined kinks where they're getting off the ground, landing sideways at 125 miles an hour. I don't want to see that. I want to see gravel. I want to see car control on gravel, and that to me, there should be. I know there are a lot of gravel events on the calendar, and to the purists in rallying, I'm sure they're saying no, we got to have tarmac. And I know, my mate Terry Newell says he prefers tarmac, but I'm sure he does in a way because there are less variables. I get gravel, and that's why I'm hoping to get to Latvia and to Finland pretty soon as well, just to see these guys and what they do on the gravel. I find it's astonishing. And I've actually got a stone, or we've actually got a stone we brought back from Sardinia, which is a stone that nearly hit us as Kalle Rovanperä was coming through the corner where we were watching, and the stone, there were several of them just sprayed up at us, and one of them missed me about a foot or something, and we took the stone home, the Kalle stone. It's really cool. What's he talking about? That's dangerous. No. We were standing far enough back for it to be barely moving by the time it got to us. So yeah, I think Robert, to get back to the point, Robert, people would say, I shouldn't go rallying, it's too dangerous. Well, if they went gravel rallying, I'm not sure it would be as dangerous as going tarmac rallying. And I mean, Kimi, to his credit, did quite a lot of gravel, didn't he? Well, being a Finn, he would, wouldn't he? So, but then again, Hecky's a Finn. So I'm kind of defeating my own argument. There we are. Let's go to the next one. This is hi Peter. Do you think this is in capital? Oh no, this is Dwayne. Okay, Dwayne. Well, I hope it's a good one. We're not going to be. Why don't you use lowercase, mate? It puts everybody on edge when you're writing capital letters. But anyway, there you go. Hi Peter. Do you think Zach will finally accept Lando as not world driver material and Oscar should stop making his advantage and strategy? You're a massive Oscar Piastri fan, aren't you, Dwayne? Nothing wrong with that, but be objective, mate, because Lando is indeed world championship material. We all know that. He's very, very good. But at the moment, Oscar is doing a much better job. So I don't think, in answer to your question, I'm trying to give it a serious answer. I believe the amount of time and money and energy that Zach has spent on Lando, and that applies in reverse as well, I don't believe Zach will suddenly say to Lando Norris, I don't think you got what it takes, mate. I don't think you can win a world championship. I'm putting all my effort into Oscar Piastri. So in answer to your question, I think no. Kidus Abdullah, before you get on with your wisdom, I say everything is working fine and we can hear you. Well, thank you very much. I'm starting my routine a little bit differently, as you can see. I'm spending a little bit more time making sure the audio is okay, the picture's okay. And that sort of, we're starting in 2 minutes thing, was just to make sure that I saw it on my YouTube channel before I actually, came on screen and started waffling. Powell M. Following question. Do you think Formula One will go back to V8s? The sound is missing in the current Formula One cars. Yeah, well, I wish they would. I wish they would. And it still breaks my heart that we have all these other extracurricular activities around a Grand Prix weekend, none of which really give us what we need, which is a Formula One that is tire burning, very noisy, and normally aspirated engines. Because Formula One, because it did not adopt Formula E at its very early stage, did not adopt an electric formula, if you like, to sort of take care of all that stuff and allow Formula One just to be a big, brash, brave entertainment, which we hope it always will be, because of that fight between Bernie and Jean Todt when he was FIA president, because Jean Todt then made sure that Formula E went out as a separate entity, and because Bernie just hated the sound of electric racing cars, and not the sound, metaphorically hated the sound, because there is no sound of electric racing cars. That's what happened. But if we'd had two people running the sport at that point, i.e. you and me, we would have said, yeah, of course, let's have electric racing in Formula One as part of the calendar. We'll do a race at 9 o'clock every Sunday morning. The teams will develop their own electric cars and have their own little extra divisions there of their own mechanics and designers and engineers, and we'll be seen to be going in that direction. And the Grand Prix drivers from the actual Formula One team must do at least, 3 races a year in these electric cars. At the same time, let's not touch Formula One. Let's keep the V8s, the V10s. Let's make it loud, noisy, everything it should be, relatively cost effective. and go racing that way. And instead of thinking the future is with big manufacturers, the thinking should have been it's with the show. It's the TV show that will always bring the money in, as we've proved many times. It isn't, oh, we've got to have 8, 10, 6, 3, 5 manufacturers. We've got to have a great show that people will watch on television and which will translate to the big screen, which is what we're doing now. But we're doing it at the expense of incredibly expensive engines and hybrid complicated engines, and at the same time Formula One not delivering the noise that some of the fans would want to see and the simple spectacular racing that some of the fans would want to see, because we didn't put all our sustainable politics into electric racing, which we should have done, and they should have done it. And because we got these two entities, we're now stuck with Formula One having to be this sort of literal hybrid between trying to be the great Hollywood show and at the same time trying to be really technically on the edge of where the world is going and making sure we got lots of manufacturers. We're trying to do so many things with Formula One that it's no surprise it turns out to be a mess most of the time. We don't know what's going on with the regulations. Sometimes they do new regulations to make the cars more competitive, and they're even more apart than before. Other times they're supposed to be making the cars quicker and nobody notices. Other times it's supposed to be in order to bring more manufacturers in. It doesn't do anything to change the balance of the grid. We're doing all these different things that never needed to have been done. We had a great show. Let me remind you, the package cost of a V8 engine deal prior to 2014 was around 12 million euros a year. Now, if you want to have a Mercedes or a Ferrari or not a Renault anymore, or a Honda probably, well over 25 million for sure, probably more. And it's, this is at a time when we got cost cuts and all the things trying to reduce the budgets. It's ridiculous. And it all goes back to Formula One not adopting Formula E as part of its package, like it's adopted Formula 3, Formula 2, Academy. All these things are on the Formula One, list of things you can have over a weekend. And we should have an electric championship of our own. But they didn't, because Bernie and Todd, obviously, were just completely at odds over the whole Bahrain Grand Prix Civil War thing, and that was it. And we're paying the price still. Wolf Hunter 777. I met Jackie Ickx at Le Mans last week. How would you rate him in the history of drivers? Yeah, very good. And for those that haven't seen it, I've done a long interview with Jackie Ickx quite recently. I mean, it's within the last 3 years, about his career, and he speaks at length. That's when his book was published. And if you haven't read his book or bought his book, I counsel you to do so. It's excellent, wonderful photographs in there as well. Jackie Ickx was unbelievably quick and very versatile, obviously. Very easy to say that because in the context that many drivers were versatile in his era, because you had to be. You had to drive Formula 1, Formula 2, Can-Am, sports cars, touring cars, everything. And Jackie did it. But everything he did extremely well. The son of Pascal Ickx, wonderful Belgian motoring journalist. And he was a lovely guy. Always got on well with Jackie, very polite, very intelligent as well. He had some incredibly difficult, sad moments in his career with other drivers having serious accidents, drivers that he was either sharing a car with or was near. But he was a young driver. He was a superstar when he arrived in Formula One, and it all happened quite quickly for him. It was almost Max Verstappen-ish, but he didn't have. But it was a different time because things were much more dangerous, and they were doing so much racing in so many different categories as well. But yeah, I mean, he won that '68 French Grand Prix, his first Grand Prix win in the wet. Admittedly, the fast stones were better that day on the Ferrari, but it was still a great win on a very, very daunting, difficult circuit. Chris Amon should have won it actually, but chose the wrong tires. But Jackie Ickx, yeah, really good, famous for his pass of. Can't remember who it was now. Around the outside of Paddock Bend in the Race of Champions in the Lotus when he was at Lotus, and drove for so many great teams as well. But yeah, great guy. I really, where would I put him? I would say he was. George Russell speed, and a little bit softer than George Russell with his inputs. A little bit quicker than Lando, I would say. If you're trying to put, I'd say he falls between Lando and George. Actually, I think George is probably slightly quicker. Well, I don't know. You know, that's wrong. I take that right back. I mean, think of Ickx in the Formula 2 Matra, Tyrrell Matra, at the '67 German Grand Prix on the Nordschleife, the big circuit. It's in a Formula 2 car, and of course, all the Formula 1 cars they dominated their positions on the grid, and then the first Formula 2 car was behind the last Formula 1 car on the grid. But had they had an amalgamated grid, I think he would have been something like 4th on the grid. I mean, he was unbelievably quick around the Nürburgring, as he proved in so many different cars, Ferrari, McLaren, Tyrrell Matra. And so in that sense, I'd take it back. No, he was sensationally quick. He was up there with Jackie Stewart in terms of pace, I think. And it was interesting. He played quite an interesting, I've used the word twice, interesting there, but it was fascinating to hear Jackie talk about the role Jackie Ickx played in Jackie's career. Because when Jackie was at BRM, he received an offer from Ferrari to go to Ferrari. And he went down to Maranello and he agreed a deal with Enzo Ferrari with the money and everything else. And he hadn't signed it. But he also had on the table a potential deal with Ken Tyrrell to go Formula 1 with Ken Tyrrell with a Matra, which is a bit of an unknown quantity, but it was with the Cosworth engine, which was, you know, a very big attraction, obviously. Anyway, he goes to a Formula 2 race not long after that. And Jackie Ickx comes up to Jackie and says, "Oh, hey, you're joining Ferrari. I'm a bit annoyed because you're getting paid more than me or something." And Jackie thought, "Wow, I can't believe Enzo Ferrari has told Jackie Ickx about our conversation that we hadn't even signed." And on the basis of that he couldn't trust the situation, he went to Tyrrell. Actually, and simultaneously, Jim Clark was saying, go to Tyrrell. It's got to be the way to go, Jackie." And so he went to Tyrrell. But it's interesting. Had Enzo Ferrari not told Jackie Ickx behind the scenes what was going on, Jackie might well have gone to Ferrari. He might well have had a different career. So that was that. The other thing, my dear friend Sid Williams, very, very good Formula 3, Formula 2 driver who passed away recently, was in the latter part of his life, had a really good little business of driving classic racing cars around Europe for people that wanted to get them from A to B to do events or whatever. And he did quite a lot of work for Jackie Ickx. And I remember him saying, he said, "You know, I had to go and pick up some cars from Jackie the other day." And he said, "You go to this house, not far from Brussels, I think," he said. "And you go there and it looks fairly normal, obviously a nice house. But then Jackie presses a few buttons and you go down to this underground car park and it's like, whoa, the cars he's got underneath it." Yeah, good man, Jackie Ickx, good man. My only claim to fame really with Jackie Ickx was rescuing him in the paddock at Monaco a few years back, when he was on that sort of very narrow strip where you can walk outside the cage, you know, where the peasants have to go in order to try to get to the turnstile thing to get into the Formula 1 paddock. And he was there looking a bit lost and bewildered. Jackie Ickx. And I said, "Oh, Jackie, how are you? Hello, how are you?" And I said, "What are you trying to do?" And he said, "Oh, I'm trying to get to see Pasquale, you know, to get the pass that he'd been promised." And so I said, "Well, let me see if I can help." So I went back in and found Pasquale. I said, "Pasquale, Jackie Ickx is outside." And Pasquale went like that, rolling his eyes as if, you know, Ickx again asking for a pass. I just thought, sums up modern Formula 1, doesn't it? Anyway, we did get the pass and we got Jackie Ickx in, and that was nice. Mr. Nguni. "Hi, Peter. I want to ask you what your thoughts are about that Monaco race with Nigel and Ayrton in '92 when Nigel caught up to Ayrton. How did he find that performance?" Oh, well, Nigel was in the quicker car and he was always quicker than Ayrton that weekend, qualifying and throughout the race. And he just he had a puncture and had to come in and change the tyres. And of course, then he was on new tyres, so the car was even quicker. But it was just a case of classic blocking by Ayrton and no chance for Nigel to get past. So all he could do was just fill the mirrors of Ayrton, both sides, just fill it with that. One of the reasons we had the yellow on the car was to make sure that it stood out in the mirrors. And yeah, Ayrton would have seen it, and Ayrton would have just thought, right, forget the mirrors and just drive my race and just use the middle of the road. He'll never get past, and drive as slowly as I can. And that's what he did. It was very frustrating. A lot of people think, wow, you know, what a great Grand Prix. I found it unbelievably frustrating, annoying Grand Prix, because we should have won that easily. Just as Nigel should have won in '87 when he was leading easily in the Williams FW11B Honda at Monaco, and a exhaust manifold cracked, and it being a turbo engine, turbos, all the power went and you had to retire. And we only found out later that Honda had changed the gauge of the material of the manifold and made it slightly thinner to save weight. And that's why it cracked. And then they went back to the original spec. So that was annoying. But yeah, 92, Nigel should have won. Funny enough, I was talking to Nigel yesterday. Best wishes to him. He's just celebrating his wedding anniversary. He was in the Bahamas, actually. I don't know if I should be giving that away, but he was. And we were talking about the 11B, and he's going to be driving that at Goodwood. And I was just saying, take it easy, because, you know, it's a bit of a hairy monster, that thing. It was a beautiful car when you had all the tyres warm and the brakes warm and everything was right. But, you know, up the hill at Goodwood in the rain, possibly. You know, and no, we had a good chat about golf and everything else. He's in good form. Harry Moyes, hey Peter, what do you think of drivers like Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hulkenberg? Do you feel like their talents were maximised? It's an interesting thing that you put them in the same bracket, and I think you're correct to do so, because it's quite easy to sort of bracket them under the heading of journeyman racing drivers now. I mean, when we think of great Grand Prix winners, phenomenally quick, fast racing drivers, do we think immediately of Daniel Ricciardo? We should, actually, in a way, because in many ways, because he was that. He was really good, Daniel Ricciardo. And, you know, I just think he made a fatal mistake. You know, having spent all his life wishing that he could be in a team as good as Red Bull in Formula One, he made it. And then he left the best team in Formula One purely because they'd signed Max Verstappen, and he didn't like the way it was going, with Max obviously starting to assert his position in the team, because he was better than Daniel in a couple of areas, but not in all the areas that, you know, that a racing driver brings to the table. And I reiterate the point. I think if Daniel had stayed at Red Bull, I think he would have won at least, I don't know, 8 Grand Prix more than he has. And we'd be saying a lot more about Daniel Ricciardo. And that was the mistake. When you start leaving leaving the best team in Formula One for the wrong reason, and then you go into another team for more money, it kind of eats away at you in the end, and you lose your feel for what you're doing. And that's exactly what happened. Very sad, but equally, he had a good innings, and he's got a lot of money in the bank account still, I would guess. So, you know, I'm sure he's a happy, good guy, and that's still, I'm sure he is. I mean, he's a great guy, isn't he? Nico Hulkenberg, yeah, I mean, Nico definitely should have been given more opportunities. Never had the same opportunities as Daniel Ricciardo, that's for sure. You know, when was the last time a driver got the pole for a team and then was sacked immediately afterwards? Williams, you know, after the Brazilian Grand Prix pole. And, you know, that's kind of the way it's gone for Nico. And he's always been resilient, always been there, and he's still showing unbelievable pace and and I think he's just getting better, isn't he? He's getting better all the time now. He's bringing cars home. He's using the tyres well. He's always there or thereabouts. And sometimes when things are not going right, he's right at the back. You think, oh, what's going on? And the next minute you look at the lap chart and he's suddenly halfway up again. And he's just doing a great job. You know, it's such a shame that he doesn't have Carlos Sainz alongside him next year, I think, at Sauber, because, well, Audi it'll be, because that would be a really, really strong team. Not that it won't be with Bortoleto, but it would be even better with Sainz, I think. Well, from the Sainz point of view, it's a shame he's not there, because Hulkenberg would be a great teammate for him as well. Really good foundation for the team. So do I feel like the talents were maximised? I think Daniel's was, given the choices he made. I don't think Nico's has been maximised for reasons beyond his own decision-making process. So one was in control and I think made a wrong choice. Nico's never been in a position to drive for a really, really good team and show what he can do. And I still think he'd do an excellent job. If he went to Mercedes, he'd be very, very good on the other car alongside George. And if he went to Ferrari, he'd do a good job. Same with anyone, you know, he'd be good at Red Bull. In fact, he'd be a brilliant number 2 to Max at Red Bull. A lot better than the, you know, recent guys we've had. 10EK. Hi, Peter. Curious how you would compare the one-time champions of Raikkonen and Rosberg. Who was faster? What were their styles like? And who could have won more championships? Yeah, very different drivers in every way. In personality, Kimi was, give me the racing car and I'll drive it. Not wanting to get involved with too much else. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that was kind of how it was. Didn't really enjoy Formula One, the politics, the stardom and all that stuff. Just wanted to get away from it all, but loved driving the racing car well. And when he had something to say, it was usually worth listening to. Keke Rosberg, very confident of his own ability, very, what's the word? I don't want to say egotistical, but just total belief that he had what it took from day one. Even, I remember chatting to him in the paddock at Thruxton, I think, Super B race, and I thought, wow, this guy's, that's right, yeah, because I was mates with Fred Opert, and he was driving for Fred Opert, and I thought, wow, this guy's confident, and he always was, and he was just, everything was, whenever you spoke to Keke, you always got the feeling, well, if I was in the right car, of course I'd have won that race. In terms of style, it couldn't be more apart. Kimi was the epitome of the way Max Verstappen drives at the time. Kimi was the epitome of that. Just finesse, getting the car straight for milliseconds before he loaded it up, and absolutely brilliant, even better than Perez in terms of his ability to get out of a corner without overloading the loaded rear. In today's world, where time management is critical, if Kimi was driving at the standard at which he achieved in McLaren, not Ferrari, but McLaren, then I think he'd be in a class of his own still, just in terms of time management. But then, he went off the rails a bit and wasn't quite as good, whereas Keke was a completely different sort of driver. He was sort of Liam Lawson, wider approach to the corner, drove with the rear of the car all the time. He was not about the front. If he had understeer, it was very difficult for Keke to do anything about it, as we saw in McLaren in 76 when he went to McLaren. Sorry, 86 when he went to McLaren. And he just couldn't drive the car with understeer. And he just but with front end grip, as he had at Williams, for example, he was unbelievably quick. Because he just, the rear, he could do whatever he liked with the rear, and he'd always hold it, and usually with a foot flat on the throttle. And 85 pole at the British Grand Prix, Silverstone, at a time when Copse was a faster corner, Stowe was a quick corner, Club was even quicker. Keke, that was over 160 mile an hour lap, wasn't it? It was just a brilliant lap in the FW 10. And that was the 10, it wasn't the 10B, it was the 10 before it had the better rear suspension. And he was, he was just larger than life, Keke. It was the bright yellow ICI overalls. It was the Hard Rock Save the Planet bomber jacket that he used to wear. It was the cigarette, throw it on the ground, stamp it out, and climb into the racing car. That was Keke Rosberg, and called him Rocky. Everybody called him Rocky at the time, partly because of the Hard Rock bomber jacket, partly because, he was Rocky. And he was just super quick in that sense, car controlling quick at a time when you could use the rear to your advantage. But it was nothing like the same finesse on the rear as Kimi Raikkonen, no chance. If Kimi had stayed on the straight and narrow for longer, I think, yes, he could have won more world championships I think Keke's results were about right, given that he was a big oversteer driver. And he, it would have been a bit like the Montoya-Kimi partnership at McLaren. If Keke had been racing at that point, I think it would have gone about the same way. So yeah, Kimi was the higher level driver in terms of style and ability, but Keke had an immense drive to his personality, competitive nature, and loyalty too. He was always loyal to Fred Opert, for example. And I always respected that enormously about Keke. Because Fred Opert was a really good guy, really nice guy, American team owner. Lijenga Eugene. Hi, Peter. This is Eugene from Nairobi. Hi there. What's your perspective on Ferrari's management replacing Freddy Vasseur with Coletta? Does Fred Vasseur's approach to protecting the engineers do himself harm? Well, Coletta is the guy running the WEC team at the moment, which, to me, that's all, yeah, the WEC team is getting great results at the moment. P4 at Le Mans aside. But then again, you've got two types of team principal you can have. You can have the sort of pen pushing, button pressing, typewriter, pushing, writing team principal who does everything correctly according to the way the world is in 2025. Or you've got real racers out there who put their neck on the line and tell people the way it is and get on with it. And to me, that's how, I think Coletta is a sort of, fairly standard civil servant type team principal And I'm not sure that just because Ferrari are winning WEC, that necessarily means that he's absolutely the right guy to have at Ferrari, because we just don't know how deep the competition is in WEC. Yeah, you can look at all the names and the drivers and the teams, but none of us know really what it's all about, because there are so many, amateur drivers involved as well. So I don't think WEC should be used as any sort of yardstick for doing the job in Formula One. And a good example of that is Jonathan Wheatley. I mean, Jonathan Wheatley is not in any way a pen-pushing racer. He's a pit wall racer that sort of puts his finger up into the sky, looks at the direction of the wind, and then decides what's best for the cars that day. That's what you want. You don't want guys who just sort of tick all the boxes and make sure that we're okay in this area, the budget's right. They just become effectively accountants running the team. You don't want that, especially at Ferrari. Now, on the other side of the coin, Freddy Vasseur in some ways is that racer. The problem is, it's nothing to do with the way he handles the engineers now. The problem is he's made two massive mistakes. He didn't sign Adrian Newey, which, if you are the racer team principal of a team like Ferrari, should be your number one priority. And the second mistake is part of that, which is that one of the reasons he didn't sign Adrian Newey is that he spent so much time signing Lewis Hamilton when he didn't need Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, he had Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. Drivers are okay. Let's focus 100% on getting Adrian Newey. And that's what Freddy Vasseur did not do. It's nothing to do with how he treats the engineers now, because the damage is done. They don't have a proper engineering base at Ferrari. And that's the problem. So I don't believe that just replacing him now with Coletta would change anything. How would that change anything? Is Coletta going to come in and say, now I can reveal it. I've been having talks with Adrian Newey for the last 6 months, and he's leaving Aston Martin and he's joining us in 3 weeks. Is that going to happen? I don't think so. So, end of story. Ferrari are where they are, and they've got to make the best of where they are. And where they are, they might as well leave Freddy Vasseur there, because nobody's going to do a better job of Fred in a situation where they don't really have very good engineering, or they don't have Adrian Newey. He'll get the best from those guys. And anyway, it's not so much the engineers behind the scene, it's what's going on at the racetrack that is the issue at the moment, and the lack of communication. Well, it's not the lack of it is the lack of communication. It's the lack of proper preparation between the driver and the engineer. I mean, Charles Leclerc should not be having conversations with his race engineer mid-race when they say to him, "How are the tyres, Charles?" And he says, "Pretty good." And they say, "Plan B." And he says, "No, I think we can go plan C." Copy that. And the next minute, he's on plan B. And he says, "Why am I coming in?" And they said, "Oh, plan B." "Well, but I said the tyres were okay." "Oh, yeah, but we're doing plan B." I mean, that is absolutely wrong. That should not be happening. All of that stuff should have been sorted out before the race. And it's not. And that's what I find very scary about Ferrari at the moment, that they've had lots of episodes like that, and it's not good. It's not good at all. And there are other examples that we can go into on the Lewis side as well. Where Lewis says, "Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that?" All these things should be sorted out beforehand. So yeah, I don't believe that Coletta, if he came in, would be able to. Well, he might change that. He might have a more disciplined approach, I suppose. So anybody could, though. I'm sure Fred will be thinking, "I've got to get on top of this." I'm sure. Maybe he's not, because everything I've assumed he'll do, he doesn't seem to have done recently. Don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's all just too much. For Freddy Vasseur, is a fairly low-key guy, used to sort of running a race team and not really having to be in the public eye. Maybe it's all just too difficult, having to do interviews all the time and be the focal point of Ferrari, and he never imagined it was going to be this bad. Maybe. And he was never prepared for it. But then Lewis should be helping him a bit, really. I mean, they are mates. They go back a long, long way, don't they? Lewis should be saying, "Look, this is what we should be doing." Well, maybe he's trying to, but it's just not working. iRacing Aussie, g'day, mate. Good to hear from you. Dear Peter, amazing show once again. Thank you. How would Alan Jones have fared in today's Formula One against Russell, Max and Lando if he were their teammates? Well, funnily enough, I was talking to Nigel Mansell about this yesterday, about how many laps Lando sat behind Oscar when he was behind him, sort of, wondering whether he should try to overtake him. And he had the pace, obviously. His tyres were 2 laps newer and the same car, and he was quicker. And, Nigel sort of laughed, as you can imagine, chortled. And And of course, you're right. You know, if Alan Jones is in that situation, would he have sort of dawdled for 3 laps behind him and then sort of made a perfunctory move going into the chicane when there was no way he was going to get past there anyway? And yeah, I mean, Jonesy would. Yeah, I mean, you know what? The trouble is, you can't quote Alan Jones because every other word is either a swear word or it's completely inappropriate. But all I can say is that Alan Jones would be saying, "Yeah, mate, yeah, get on with it. I thought you're racing drivers. What you doing?" And so it would go from there. You know, Alan Jones would do. I mean, AJ. I used to do these chats with him after races, and they were so good because he had so many great comments. But because he was always on a mobile phone in a terrible area, the audio was so bad that I gave up in the end. But you know, I would imagine he'd think George Russell did a pretty good job over the weekend, and he'd probably be pretty pro Kimi, I would imagine. Max, I think he probably would imagine got the best from the car. But I think the McLaren thing, he'd think, you know, he'd be saying pretty nasty things about Lando, wouldn't he? You know, he'd be saying, just, you know, get a life, get on, mate. You're a racing driver. You're not a movie star. You know, you're a racing driver. And he's right. Of course he's right. And I think he'd be annoyed by the whole Mick Doohan, Jack Doohan, Colapinto situation. I see Colapinto's finishing every interview by saying, "I'm looking forward to doing that in the next race," making sure that everybody at Alpine knows that he's going to do the next race. I mean, what is Jack Doohan thinking? I mean, I feel so sorry for him. I just hope we see him in a car again soon because he's very good, Jack Doohan. And Colapinto had a half reasonable qualifying session, didn't he? And went quite well, but I'm not sure where he was in the race. Disappeared without trace quite quickly, didn't he? Jose Samut, shouldn't we be talking about Le Mans? Not really, no. I'm not massively into Le Mans, as you know, since Jim Clark, Colin Chapman, Lotus 23 debacle of 1962. So what can I say? And beyond that, this is a Formula One YouTube channel. I don't know whether you've noticed that. I tend to do Formula One, bit of rallying because I indulge myself and want to break my own rules. And obviously the past, present and future of Formula One. So that's it. If you know, Le Mans is so well handled by all those other websites out there that have all the breaking news and all the stuff that about all those different categories and cars, which I don't understand at all, that you're very welcome to go there. But I'm, you know, over my head, I'm afraid. I'm not bright enough to be able to handle all the current Le Mans stuff. But thanks for the question. Where are we? James Harper, Peter, you've been very harsh on Lewis because of your fawning for Charles. Sainz is further away from Albon in qualifying than Lewis from Charles. Well, for one thing, I don't believe I've fawned over Charles. If you look at my video from the Spanish Grand Prix, I was unbelievably critical of Charles and the move he made on Max on the straight. So first of all, please get your facts right. Secondly, Sainz is further away from Albon than Lewis is from Charles. Well, what's that got to do with anything? I did say that Sainz's biggest problem if he went to Williams would be having to beat Alex Albon, and I've proven to be correct there. And Lewis from Charles, what's never mentioned? Anyway, James, I think you're so twisted up in your, I don't know what, in your questioning in your mind that I can't really answer the question anymore. I'm not quite sure what you mean at all. Where's the comparison? We're talking about the Williams team versus the Ferrari team. I think that, you know, please clarify, I think is the right way to end this one. Wallon, Peter, if Horner goes to Ferrari and team up with Hammy and Max goes to Merc with Toto, it would be absolute cinema. Well, yeah, exactly. Is that what we want? Cinema? Don't think we do we? Not Formula One, do we? But I do think if Christian went to Ferrari, he would be more able to possibly, well, as I said before, the problem at Ferrari is they've missed that big golden opportunity to get Adrian Newey. So that's a big problem. So whether Horner could then get the next lot, next best people on the grid of engineers, which is, you know, I guess it would be Pete Prod, Marshall, Rob Marshall from McLaren, and perhaps a couple of others, maybe somebody from Racing Bulls, which, you know, Horner should be able to do, then maybe that would be good. As I say, you know, the horse is bolted now, so it doesn't really matter who's there. They might as well keep Fred. It's not a question of team manager now. It's a question of make the best of what we got, I think. What was the other thing? And Max goes to Mercedes with Toto. Well, why would he do that? Why wouldn't he go to Aston Martin? If he's going to leave Red Bull, surely Max would go to Adrian Newey, wouldn't he? Why would he go to George Russell? Doesn't make any sense to me. He'd go to Adrian Newey, I think. Anyway. Ice11. Hi, Peter. Hope you have a great day. Could you do more picture analysis? They're very insightful. Thank you very much. Yeah, I will. I will try to. I've got my iPad here, so I won't do any now. But because I'm still trying to get my head around it, trying to find the right definition of pen to get it absolutely right. I find it quite difficult to do a line around a corner the way Enrique Scalabroni would do a line around a corner, which would be absolutely perfect. The radius is wrong here. Because mine are all over the place, which is why I sort of do the sketchy Van Gogh type thing. Yeah, right, Peter, get a life. But yeah, hopefully the message of what I'm trying to say gets through. And so that would be, that's nice to hear that you like them, and I'll try and do some more. I think, yeah, it'd be quite interesting. The next one I'm going to look out for would be, say, Lawson versus Hadjar at Racing Bulls, and we'll try and find the trouble with Austria is I was trying to think what is a revealing corner in Austria, and I don't, I hate to say it, but I don't think that many are, because they're all, how late you brake without making the car unstable. That would apply to 1, turn into 2. 2, you can either brake late and then slow rotation come out, or vice versa. And yeah, big deal. They can all do that, all try the different things. And it's because it's a sort of uphill exit, slightly different anyway. Downhill right-hander. Yeah, kind of. It's a bit sort of wishy-washy there. And then you got the left. I don't know. Austria is not a place that sets me on fire in terms of finesse. And although if it was the long circuit, it'd be a different story, obviously. But that doesn't happen anymore. Silverstone will do some more for sure. Tick short snaps. Peter, did you watch lower lap time video about short corner and tight line where he mentions your misinterpretation of those terms? No, I didn't. No. I tend not to watch other motor racing videos because I've got so many reruns of the Dick Van Dyke Show to watch. And then it's going to be the Lone Ranger. And then it's going to be McHale's Navy. And, by the time I've got through all that lot, I'm afraid tick short snaps at the bottom of the list. My misinterpretation, I'm not quite sure what that would be. I've always made it very clear that there are two types of, in terms of getting into a corner early, there are two types of driver. There's the sort of Jean Alesi, Sebastian Vettel V corner, Jacques Lafitte V corner approach, which works on specific types of corners, providing you got a decent back end on the car. And I say back end because that's what they need for rotation to get the traction. And then I've said there are short corner drivers who don't always manifest their talent actually in a short corner, but in order to break in, to turn in on the brakes, you've got to have an incredible level of finesse and touch that many drivers don't have, which is why they tend to stay wide and go in late and drive on the rear of the car. But a short corner driver isn't always going to drive with short corners. A good example is turn 1 to 2 into Canada. That wasn't a short corner. In fact, it was a slightly longer corner that Charles was taking, as I showed in my description. What the key to that was his ability between turn 1 and 2 to find the precise moment to slow the car down when he had the minimum amount of lateral load on the car, the least amount of minimum lateral load on the car, and to get the car correctly positioned and not worry about his rotation speed into 2. That's what it's all about. That wasn't a short corner, but because it was a short corner driver, because it was a driver capable of creating short corners in the right environment, it worked perfectly for Charles. That is my point. So misinterpretation, a bit of a glib word there. And, I hope you were there defending me, mate. That's all I can say. So what else are we saying here? Oh, so I've got some nice... Wolf Hunter has taken his message away, but nonetheless given me a super chat. Thank you very much indeed. Very nice. So we go. Right. Johan Janssen, should Russell have been penalised in Canada for brake testing and being more than 10 car lengths away from the safety car? I mean, that whole safety car thing, how far away from the safety car, came up at Fuji in 2007, I think, in the rain, didn't it, with Lewis? And that's when it's always been a bone of contention. If you're leading the race, how slowly you can run. And I think there's quite a lot of freedom allowed now, because at some point the leader is allowed to slow the race down to whatever he wants to slow it down to. And it's a difficult one at that point to actually arbitrate on, I think. As for the braking, no, I think, again, it's very difficult to actually say that he was brake testing as distinct from brake warming or front tire warming. So to me, that was a protest that was always going to fail. I think George is on the edge of what was doable, but I think it was on the edge because there was no way a protest was ever going to work. That's what I think. And, you know, and I was disappointed that Red Bull actually went down the protest route. I don't think it was a good look for them to do that, because there's no way they were going to win it. And regardless of what you may think about the explicit interpretation of the rules, and, you know, Max was P2 at the end of the day. You know, I mean, I suppose you could say it was all triggered by George saying Max is just overtaking me under the safety car, and then you could say, well, if he's going to say that, then we'll protest them. If George hadn't said that, probably there would have been no protest. It was just like tit for tat, wasn't it? So it's all a bit out of hand, and I don't think it was appropriate for George to say that either, really, because what Red Bull were going to say and do was inevitable. So it's a shame. It's a shame. So there we go. And a message to James Harper. If you think it's clever to ask the same rather inane question 3 times, ain't working, mate. So I suggest you go and, you know, think about what YouTube channels you want to watch. Reinder Krozer, let's not ask the same question 5 times, people. Well, I just agree with me. Thank you very much. Jose Summit says, okay, then Lando should keep his loser personality. It's nothing to do with his personality. He's not a loser. What he is a guy who's created another portal of his life, which is this social media brand of Lando Norris. And that's what he needs to get away from. I don't know other ways of saying it. I've said it in a million different ways now. There aren't any more left. He's got to focus on his side of the garage. He's got to remain the Lando Norris that he's always been. Don't change your personality, but change the way you are as a racing driver. 2 different things completely. So, yeah. Milnsey says, Alan Jones said Lando was mentally weak. Yeah, well, you know, as a racing driver, I agree with him, because he's got so many distractions going on around him. And I don't think McLaren help, because they're constantly distracting him, saying things like, oh, will you give this win to Oscar Piastri, please, Lando? And would you, you know, think about your braking references and turn in a bit earlier here and all that stuff. He should be driving on gut feel. He's a racing driver. He doesn't need all that stuff. And he should be putting an end to it all. Again, from Eugene, from Nairobi, how do you rate George Russell compared to his peers like Charles, Oscar, Lando, Max? Why do you think Toto Wolff has locked him up for the future? Or do you think he has? I'm sure Toto has, and I'm sure George wants to be locked up, but for the highest possible money, which is why he will be talking to a few other teams just to try to get it up. But I can't imagine they would either one of them would want to be going racing without the other. How do I rate George compared with Charles, Oscar, Lando, Max? Well, compared with Charles, I would say his corners are longer and he's slightly more spiky with his inputs, but he's very, very precise, and so he's getting away with it. And that's when that happens. It doesn't happen very often in Formula One over the years, and I've been around. It's unbelievably impressive to watch. He's super, super quick. It's like James Hunt in 1976. I don't think James was that good in 75, and I don't think he was that good in 70. 77 he was there, but 78 I think it went away. But that's how good James Hunt was in 76, the way George Russell's driving right now. Oscar, I think, is softer inputs than George, but he has the potential to make his corners a lot shorter and be more economical with the way he drives. I think George is actually starting to really understand the importance of straight lines within the corner, if you like, and he was just incredible through turn 1, turn 2 in qualifying. His qualifying lap was just amazing, I thought. And Lando, sorry, I'm talking about I'm getting confused here. I'm talking about Lando. I shouldn't, so everything I've said now is to do with Lando. I think Lando is, he should be using shorter corners. He is softer touch than George, but I don't think he's as car controlly as George. I think if there's well, we know it, you know, if there's a 160 mile an hour right-hander with a crosswind, and it's flat, George is going to be flat and Lando's probably going to lift a little bit. That's the difference, I think. Which doesn't mean to say that Lando isn't worthy of a World Drivers' Championship, to quote a lot of people who are asking that question at the moment. It just means that Lando needs to make up his speed in other areas, and he's pretty good. You know, we've seen that in the wet. We've seen that lovely ability he has, which George doesn't have really, of Lando just letting the car float sometimes. I think, where was it? Qatar, he showed that very well last year too. So he's got that lovely ability to do that. Silverstone last year, actually. So he does that. Oscar, yeah, very oversteery. Not oversteery, but he drives on the rear of the car, incredibly confident. I would say he's very near to Alan Jones was in 79-80. And that's very high. It's a very high standard. Driving on the rear of the car, but just the right amount, not out of line any more than he should be. Totally confident in what the car's going to do and in his own ability, and a lot of time to think about in his brain, to think about the race and the strategy and the tire management, and to talk to the team in a very calm, methodical way. And that shows how much of a sweet spot he's in. I would compare that with Alan Jones 79-80. Max, I think Max is better than all of those guys. I think he's got everything that we've just described, plus the ability to find a sweet spot just to get the car in the middle of a change of direction, get it to do it perfectly. He can find the moment of least possible downside on any given corner on which to rotate the car with the least downside, as I say, and to get the car at exactly the right angle that he needs on exit. And he's, you know, that gives him such a big platform on which to operate that he can deal with all the variables that are thrown to him, including the wet, including tire management, including wind, including oil, including a million things, and a lot of time to think about the race as well, like Oscar and George for that matter. Less so for Charles, I think, partly because Charles' brain is so taken up with emotion, and that's, you know, he's going to have that, I think, all his life. Max is, yeah, but Max's shortcoming is his short fuse and his harshness as a racer. He will always go for the gap, which Ayrton Senna would applaud, but at the same time, I think he's a little bit over the top with how, you know, having to deal with a car that isn't super competitive, and how to deal with that sometimes in race situations, as we saw in Spain. I'm thinking of Spain. I don't think it was a good thing that he did. I think it's understandable because, you know, that's Max, always has been, but it shouldn't be condoned, I don't think. But Max is as good as it gets, really. Very, very good. So there we go. So Chris McClellan has just put out a nice thing telling people to stop being so rude and to be more respectful. I really appreciate that, Chris. Thank you very much. Very kind. I mean, it's odd, isn't it? Because Twitter used to be the least respectful area, and it probably still is, actually. And YouTube generally, on live streams, people are relatively intelligent and, well, they're all intelligent, I suppose. I shouldn't be in any way disingenuous like that, but you know, please try to be respectful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. 10EK. Hi Peter, I'm curious as to your opinion on publicly accessible simulators like iRacing, Gran Turismo, Assetto Corsa, and how they can lead to making legitimate racing drivers. Well, they can be a start, that's for sure. I actually think that if you are a great Grand Prix driver or a great racing driver, let's say, I don't know, let's say James Collado, who a driver I've always rated and I think is wasted in WEC, or was wasted. I mean, he's too late now for him to do anything else, but I've always rated James and always saw him as a potential George Russell, if you like. I think that if you're that standard, let's say you're not in Formula One and you're James Collado and you go into the Ferrari simulator and the Ferrari Formula One simulator, I think he could benefit a lot from that. And he could show the engineers quite a lot of what he could do. And that would be a useful thing for him. I think if you're a young guy starting out, I don't think simulators can have the same beneficial effect. I think iRacing is a very, very good thing in terms of competitiveness, track craft, in the way that karting can be as well, without actually having to get into a kart and go racing. But you've got to be very careful about comparing your hand-eye coordination with the management of dynamic weight. The management of dynamic weight is what driving a racing car is all about. And that doesn't even show through in karting, which is quite darty and stiff. And hand-eye coordination, to some extent, is what iRacing is all about. There's a little bit more than that, because obviously the feet come into it as well. But you know what I'm saying. And I can only reiterate Carlos Reutemann going to the Williams F1 team, not quite a while ago now, but they did have their big sim running at the time, and it was pretty good, and did a lap of Monaco, and he said, get me out of this. After one lap, the hairs were standing up on his arms. He said, this is so foreign, so far away from actually driving a Grand Prix car. I can't stand it. Get me out of here. And this is a guy who's sufficiently talented and well-rounded and versatile to have, as I say, scored a World Rally Championship podium and a Formula One World Championship Grand Prix podium in successive weeks. Able to jump from a Williams Formula One car into a rally car and be on the podium of both events. This guy was seriously good. And yet he said he couldn't stand it because there was no dynamic feel for what he was doing. And that's obviously what it is all about. That's what makes, when you look at Max Verstappen driving, or George, let's say George, because we talk about Max a lot. Say George Russell, you're following George on his pole lap at Canada, and you're thinking, oh yeah, he's precise here, and he's got the throttle on here, and he's braking a little bit later there, and he's coming out of the brakes sooner, whatever they want to say about the analysis of the lap. None of it actually is capturing what George is doing. What George is doing is reacting to the myriad of dynamic weights that are moving. I say dynamic, they're constantly changing weights going through his body, through the car, through the tires, through the brakes, through everything that he's managing all the time with all these inputs. It's like dancing with, I don't know, 27 different things you can adjust. That's a bad example. It's like, as I keep coming back to, it's like the pool table with the balls in the middle, and you move the balls around, and then you have to try to move the table so that none of the balls touch the edge of the table, and you're constantly moving these 27 balls, or how many there are. And that's what it's like driving a racing car. And simulators, as much as I understand them, yet do not do that. As I say, if you've got to sort of certain levels, say 80% there, and you're James Collado, I think you could benefit a lot from a Formula One simulator, a good one. So there you go. So Aaron Lee, hi Peter, I noticed that many drivers were ending their qualifying laps in Canada by taking a diagonal line from the wall of the champions towards the wall on the left, where Lando crashed in the race. Why would they do this instead of going straight towards the finish line at the end of the lap, after which the racing line doesn't matter? That's a good point. And the reason they're doing that is because when they're coming out of the right-hander, sorry, the left-hander, they go through the right and then the left, then up by the wall, touching the wall almost. They're not touching the wall absolutely parallel to the wall. If you look at the way Max was doing, his right rear was going very near the wall, and by then the car was sort of slightly pointing left. And it's very important at that point that you then accelerate in a straight line. And the straight line is actually angled at that point. It's not dead straight down parallel to the wall. It is already angled from what they're doing coming out of the corner. And those that were trying to keep it down the straight, well, I don't think anybody did actually. I think everybody just followed the angle. A good example of a corner where some drivers do that and some don't is the second chicane exit at Monza, where if you don't touch the curb coming out or don't use too much curb, you can come out and keep the car absolutely straight and accelerate up to the first Lesmo. But if you touch the curb and the left rear's like that and the car's suddenly angled, the important thing then when you're accelerating is to make sure you accelerate at the angle that is generated by that left rear, because then you are accelerating in a straight line. And if you don't do that, you're then accelerating with load, of course. And funnily enough, I remember once watching, who was it? Fernando was doing that perfectly out of the second chicane at Monza in the Renault, I think it was. And he was coming out and he hit an angle. And for some reason, David Coulthard comes into this story. I don't know why. I think I might have been standing next to David or something. I don't know why I would have been. Or maybe I was talking to David about it later. It was probably that. And he said, oh, yeah, I was following Alonso. And why does he, he's accelerating at an angle like that? And I said, wasn't it logical that if the car's at an angle already on the exit, that he's just going to keep that straight line angle? And David said, yeah, it makes sense. I take no credit for that, but I guess after that, David always did the same thing. So that's what you're seeing out of that corner. It's an interesting observation. I mean, glad you observed it, but but Max was doing that. I hate to keep going on about Max, and George too, doing exactly the same thing. Whatever angle they hit, coming out, that was the one they kept just to get to the start-finish line. So there we go. Amy Newland, casual fan here. Yuki seems to be holding on, but why does Red Bull build a car no one seems to be able to master? Well, I think a better question is, why don't they build a quicker car? I mean, if they knew how to build a quicker car, they would. Whether a driver, whether Yuki can master that car is irrelevant. As long as Max can drive it, that's all they care about. And then the second car is the second car, or the other car, shall we say. The problem is, it's not a very good car now, and Max at his very best is still struggling to qualify top 3 and finish top 3. So what does that mean for Yuki Tsunoda? Lucky to qualify, get into Q3, and lucky to be top 10, really. That's the difference between Max and Yuki. What they don't have in the other car is an Oscar Piastri or a Lando Norris or a Lewis Hamilton or a Charles Leclerc, because they've got, B division, if you like. And it's a shame. As I said earlier a very good question about Nico Hulkenberg. If Nico Hulkenberg was in the other Red Bull, I don't think you'd be saying, why do they build cars that they can't drive? You'd be saying, why don't they build a quicker car? And the answer to that, again, is, if they knew, they would do it. I think, I was thinking about this the other day. I wonder whether Adrian wakes up in the morning and he looks at Red Bull not going very well now, and he thinks, yeah, I've got that upgrade. If only they knew the upgrade I was going to give them, and I didn't give them once I signed for Ferrari. If only they had that upgrade, they'd be winning every race, more full way. I wonder if he thinks that. I wonder if that's reality. Probably is now, Adrian. I don't mean that his brain. I just mean he probably did have an upgrade there that he never gave them. So there we go. Finton Main says, the arguments about Zach keeping with Lando because he spent money on him is the same argument Las Vegas gamblers use on slot machines. Yeah, to some extent. Although, I mean, it's a bit of an odd argument, because what are we arguing about? I mean, even if Zach did say, oh, Lando, you're not going to win, we're not going to be world champion, mate. What's he going to do? Start giving him Duff engines and a car that's not going to last the distance? He's still going to give him the best race car he possibly can, isn't he? So what's it all about? I don't really understand this line of attack at all, because, even if Zach woke up in the middle of the night and said, yeah, Oscar's my man, which I'm sure he does now. I mean, anybody in his position would be thinking that, surely. What doesn't mean to say that they're going to start giving Lando inferior equipment. What is it that everybody wants? I don't understand. I suppose what they're looking for is Lando Norris to be leading the British Grand Prix by 9 seconds from Oscar Piastri, who's 34 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen with 2 laps to go. And they're looking for Zach to get on the radio to say, Lando, give the race win to Oscar. Is that what all the fuss is about? Is that what they want now? I don't know. It ain't going to happen. If you think it is, it ain't going to happen. And this time around, I don't think Lando would be stupid enough to give him the win anyway. Anyway, lest there be any doubt, I think, as I say, I think Oscar Piastri is driving right up there with Alan Jones' 7980, and it's difficult to imagine him not being world champion this year, and good luck to him, good luck to McLaren. Dillstar22, what are you looking forward to for the rest of the season? The end? No, it shouldn't be supercilious. Stop that. What am I looking forward to? I suppose I'm looking forward to hearing more about what the 26 cars are going to be all about. We're still hearing very little about that. That would be quite good. Be one thing. What else? Hopefully Jack Doohan getting back into an Alpine. Hopefully Alpine doing a bit better. I'd love to see Pierre Gasly getting some proper results. I don't know. What else? Yeah, the usual thing, you know, watching these guys do what they do. And the right driver in the right car getting the right result over the weekend. It's a cliche in a way, but we don't always get that. And I think we do. I could do without any more sprint races. I got a sprint race weekends. So I'm looking forward to the last of the sprint races. I don't know when that's going to be. I daren't look at the calendar to see when the sprint races are even on. Probably this weekend, is there? Austria, sort of next weekend, probably a sprint race type track. Legenga Ejuni again. Oh, we've done that one. Come on, don't ask 2 questions, please. Musa Mnguni says, V10s are the absolute best. Bring back refueling. Ain't going to happen, I don't think. Apart from it being an obvious safety hazard in the pit lane, not that they seem to worry about safety hazards in the pit lane when they decided to go to a 2-stop mandatory strategy at Monaco. Is it a good look for Formula One to be seen to be pouring fuel into their Formula One cars at a time when we should be going, I don't know, electric or hydrogen or whatever they want to do? So Mouse Down. Hi, Peter. Did you manage to speak with Nicky on the day Max won his first Grand Prix? No, I didn't. No. I was at this track watching from, where was I watching from? End of the back straight through the right-hander and then down the hill. So, no. Why would I have spoken to Nicky? I don't know. I didn't speak to him about Max as such. No. I think I spoke to Joss. Yeah, I did, for sure. And Max, for that matter. Chris McClellan. Yeah, hi, Peter. Hope you're well. Part of me hopes with a bit more of a gap in the points, it allows Lando to just do what he does best and drive. He could just as easily win 4 on the bounce, for example. Yeah, he could. I mean, he's definitely won Grand Prix in style before, and he could do it again. The difference now is that Oscar Piastri is in a position where he can mentally relax a little bit and just drive and enjoy driving the McLaren Formula One car, knowing that on a bad day he's probably going to finish 3rd or 4th at worst, and on a good day he's going to win the Grand Prix still. That's the problem. And I think the Oscar that Lando has to beat now is a very different Oscar from the one he beat last year in various occasions. And that's something that I predicted would happen last winter unless Lando changed his mindset, not his personality, his mindset on how to be a racing driver and how to run his side of the garage. And he didn't change his mindset. And look what's happened. This guy who's incredibly quick is now dominating. Not dominating, but he's in a very dominant position. So even if Lando does have the next 3 Grand Prix go his way and he wins them, the odds of Oscar not finishing at least 2nd or 3rd in every one of those races is pretty small. And so the wins actually don't do very much for Lando in that sense. Let's have a look. There's another super chat here. Nigel in 93 was the same age to Lewis now. Nigel doesn't get enough credit for how good he was. Despite being a Lewis fan, there's no way he would be faster in the same car as Nigel. What say you? Well, am I biased? I don't know. I probably am. I think Nigel was still one of the most underrated Grand Prix drivers of all time. I think he was incredibly quick. And to jump from Formula One end of 92, as you say, into 93, going to IndyCar and winning the IndyCar Championship back to back with the Formula One World Championship. I mean, yeah, just fabulous. And what a driver. Would Lewis be as quick as Nigel? I think Lewis touched levels maybe slightly higher than Nigel in his late Mercedes up to 2021 years. He was very, very good. But since then, as I said in the video I've got out at the moment comparing Lewis with Charles around Canada, I think Lewis has basically, without knowing it, he's basically lost confidence in the use of the front end of the car. And that's possibly come from the less finesse that he has now as a result of having to drive the Mercedes in 2022, 2023 onwards, and that's kind of put a. If he was a golfer, it would need going to a very good swing coach and just breaking down the coach and rebuilding it again. You know, it would mean going to a Rob Wilson or somebody like that, and that's in motor racing parlance. And I think a guy like Lewis has been racing for so long that, unlike a golfer who's prepared always to think that they can improve, guys like Lewis, not just Lewis, many drivers like him, Sebastian Vettel, another good example, just believe that they've got nothing to learn and it's got to be the car. And it's interesting that this has happened since Lewis has been at Ferrari, really, this realization, even though George was pretty much blowing him away last year at Mercedes, but it's really come into focus at Ferrari. And it did for Vettel too. And I think it's because when world champions, multi-world champions go to Ferrari, it's like, well, you know, the Ferrari team, so he's a multi-world champion, you know, he's going to win with us. And the driver thinks, I'm a multi-world champion, this is a great team, I'm going to win a lot of races here. And there's no self-criticism anymore. The drivers don't think, I've got a lot to learn still. And equally, the teams don't think, this guy's got a rather strange turn in, or uses the brakes in a weird way, we better correct that. They don't think, oh, no, he's a world champion, but not tell him what to do. And that's the problem, you know. That's what I say, you know, I don't believe Lewis was the right guy for Ferrari at the time they hired him. I think they should have kept Carlos, who was getting better all the time, you know, not a Charles, but he was definitely getting better and not far away from Charles on occasion, and keeping Charles very much on his toes. So David says, did you know the long drive up to Penthouse, Earl Howe had it banked on every corner? Did he? That was brilliant. What a guy. And if you look at the pictures, it sounds like Earl Howe, you know, who is this man? But he was a cool guy, you know, racing driver, fast racing driver. And got a lot of, well, from what I read about him and know about him, got a lot of time for him, obviously. So Moss GTR, I still think it's obvious. Bring back the screaming combustion engines with renewable fuels. It's already been demonstrated by Vettel at Imola in 2024. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure you're right. But talk to Formula One about that. They think the whole future of Formula One is locked into having as many different manufacturers in the sport as possible, in Formula One as possible. And the way to get the manufacturers in is to have all these, you know, half electric engines. They don't think that just going to renewable fuel will encourage the manufacturers. And I think you're right. And I think Formula One is wrong in that it's got so many different paths of attack now, and they've lost their way. And it all got lost when they decided not to do their own electric Formula E championship. Space Ghost says, the sound's not missing. There are very, very strict sound laws in every city. Noise regulations massively impact event production. Louder means less events. Well, not if you follow the Peter Windsor prescription of building replicas of the Nürburgring, Spa, Brands Hatch, and all other great circuits, Sepang, in the middle of the Nevada desert, which is what they should be doing. Spending all that money, instead of putting on these street races, building these amazing replicas of these circuits, which can be run under lights at night. Imagine it. 15 miles, Nürburgring, all the jumps, everything, but safe, you know, with runoff areas. And that's what they should have been doing all these years. But no, nobody, they know better. So there you go. David says, Lady Howe is the King's representative for Buckinghamshire. Maybe she may attend. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? I wonder whether anyone's got the nous to invite her, based on how important Lord Howe, Earl Howe's role was in putting that 1950 British Grand Prix together. Wouldn't that be lovely? Addy Boy. Hi, Peter. I just want to correct you on the Ferrari signing timeline. Ham was signed before the 24 season. Newey only became available around a quarter of the season in. Well, yeah, technically you're correct. But don't forget, Newey went to Ferrari almost to sign a deal, like 2 years before Lewis signed for Ferrari. So there was always a line of communication to Adrian Newey. So it's not a question of, oh, he was suddenly available. Ferrari should have been trying to get him for the last 4 years. It's nothing to do with his availability. Even if you sign Adrian, you know, 3 years from now, he will join us. It's still Adrian Newey joining Ferrari. It's still a different Ferrari team. And that's my point. Yeah, you're right. Technically, you're right. But all the groundwork was done for an Adrian Newey Ferrari deal. They didn't need to do much except say, well, this time around we didn't make it, Adrian. Now, 3 weeks later, let's talk again because we want you. And this is what we want to do. Admittedly, it was a different regime then. It was Freddy Vasseur's regime, but it wouldn't have been difficult for him to look through all the chronology of what happened with the Adrian approach and then just continue it. Why didn't he do that? Why didn't he start doing that the minute he joined Ferrari? Peter, did you ever have the chance of meeting Yoken Rint? No. Meeting? Too late now for me to put the picture up because I'd mean putting in my hard drive, which would ruin the live stream for sure, technically speaking. But I did actually, when he won the Warwick Farms 69 International 100 in the wet, in the Lotus 49B, high wing car in the rain, dominated the race, unbelievable car control. And that was the race, the famous race when I remember I was flag marshalling on the outside of Paddock Bend, the first corner, and David Steindl, I was on the yellow, he was on the blue, I think, and he turned around to me and said, anybody that thinks cricket is good and Formula One is boring should come stand where we're standing right now. And it was Yoken Rint sideways in a 49B in the rain. And he was right. But after the race, I ran across, because we were at the first corner, so I was able to get to the paddock quite quickly, and I ran across, and there was Yoken with the garland around his neck, with cigarette in his mouth, and me with the camera taking pictures of him literally 2 feet away. And I'll put the next live stream, I will put those pictures in because they're quite good actually. It's Yoken after that race, but I never actually got to speak to him. I've got plenty of audio interviews with him. I might try and put one on, just people might want to know how he sounded and stuff. I'll try and put one on the live stream next live stream, one of those interviews with Yoken. And of course I've spoken a lot to Herbie Blash and others that worked with Yoken about what he was like and what a cool dude he was. As a matter of fact, when Natasha Rint, Yoken's daughter, worked for FOM, I think it was F1 TV. She definitely worked for FOM down in Biggin Hill for a while, and I was working there. She once came up to me and said, "Peter, what was my dad like as a driver? How good was he?" And I just thought, I can't believe Yoken Rint's daughter is asking me this question. And of course, I expressed my opinion, but I just thought, isn't it sad in a way that Yoken isn't more celebrated to the point where Natasha does know how good Yoken was and how great he was. Martin Lee says, always good video. Thank you very much, Martin. It's nice to have a few encouraging video comments because there seem to be a few, weirdos out there. So I'm just going to advance the chat a bit because it's frozen up, clogged with questions. Here we go. SS Space G Ghost. The Jackie Ickx black JPS car was the top speed car in trading card game circa 79. Was it? Even though at that point the Lotus 49 in 79 was green, martini green, wasn't it? With Essex on the side. It was a bit of a dog's dinner, that car. But yeah, good to know. Addy boy. So it was worse than how you described it because they weren't preoccupied with Hamilton, that they didn't sign Newey. They just didn't. Well, yeah, they could have had Newey on 2 occasions and didn't. I just find it, and as I keep saying, I think Toto Wolff should be saying the same thing to himself. If you are a team principal in this era in which we live, and Adrian Newey is the preeminent engineer, and the odds are of Adrian, that whatever team Adrian's with, it's going to be a quick car, and Aston Martin for sure will be a quick team next year. Surely you'd make it your priority to get Adrian Newey. That's one of the things, It's just like everybody's trying to get Max Verstappen. You're trying to get Adrian Newey. And Ferrari had nearly got him twice. They let him go. Benzie News Showdown. Hi, Peter. Late to the party today. Well, good to have you on board, mate. No worries. Slipstream Merchant says, hi, Peter. If by the summer break Oscar is leading the championship with Max in second, do you think McLaren will impose team orders to help Oscar against Max? Woof. Well, you're thinking of a situation. I knowing McLaren and the way they've handled it so far, I imagine they're going to do nothing until it gets to the 2 or 3 last races of the season, and then they'll see where they're at. I think until then, they basically will let the drivers race all the time. I can't imagine that they would, you know, whilst Lando or Oscar is mathematically still able to be world champion, I can't imagine they would impose team orders. But the millisecond that one of them's out of it mathematically, obviously it's a different story then. Yeah? Nothing spectacular in what I'm saying there. It's just fairly logical. Alex says, this is from Australia, super chat. Thank you very much, mate. I think it's from Australia, $1. Just wanted to say thanks for all the fantastic insights. I appreciate Formula One so much more thanks to you. Would love to hear your thoughts on what James Voles might achieve with a bit more time. Yeah, he's just renewed his contract, James Voles, with Williams, which is a good thing. He's doing a good job. And I think he's a nice blend of what I've described as a sort of civil servant type team principal and a racer. And I say he's a racer because he's spent enough time on the pit wall at Mercedes to be a racer. And so it's a good thing. And yeah, there have been a few weird things going on at Williams. And to me, it's still a rather strange team in terms of feel and, you know, what it's, I just can't really get to the character of the team at the moment. I just find it all a bit abstract. But 2 quick drivers, you know, obviously a pretty good engineering team that James Voles is getting the best from now and getting the good people to do the right things with the right priorities. And yeah, you know, doing a good job overall. I don't know how much budget they've got. I would imagine they're on the limit of the budget cap, but they should be, I guess, with a, you know, merchant bank, whatever they are, owning the team. But at the same time, maybe they're limited a little bit in what they can do with the car. I don't know. It would seem so, given the whole debacle, using the word twice now, of, you know, the spare chassis in Melbourne last year. But equally, they seem to be getting, you know, fairly consistent every race now, don't they? It's interesting, actually, with Alex Albon, he's become a little bit whiny on the radio. Have you noticed that? He was always Mr. Super Cool, nice guy, and he's become a little bit, come on, guys, what is going on here? And there's been a few of those recently. Probably justified knowing Alex. But it's interesting that the more you go on, the more people say, wow, this guy's good. And I think a lot of that is that he's done very well against Carlos Sainz. And that's obviously elevated Alex in his own mind as to how good he is. And it's, well, you know, if Carlos Sainz can win races for Ferrari against Charles Leclerc, I must be pretty good. I think it's a lot of that. So it's interesting that's happened. But no, good team. I think they're, you know, it's not the Williams team that I used to know and love, that's for sure. But equally, fair enough. It's a new era, isn't it? So, Finton Mains says, read Dirty Air. If wheels were enclosed like the 1950s Mercedes or the 1980 Can-Am, there would be no problem slipstreaming. Well, that's true. That's very true. Or like IndyCar in general, I suppose. But, yeah, you know, Mercedes, it was interesting, the 54 British Grand Prix, Fangio drove the Streamliner at Silverstone, where they had barrels basically defining the corners on the airfield circuit, as they had done since 48. And Fangio actually hit one of the barrels and said later it was because of this bodywork. I couldn't see what's going on. Front wheel. I need the front wheels exposed, please. So they took it off. I think they ran it once more that year, maybe Monza. But I think in general, racing drivers and teams would reject the idea of enclosed wheels and go back and just have the open wheels. I mean, that dirty air thing of Charles Leclerc with Isaac Hadjar, that's the most dramatic example of the effect of dirty air that I've ever seen, because he wasn't that close to him. I know the speeds were high and all the rest of it. I know there was dirty air, but we've never seen a guy in that situation, you know, then massively run wide here and massively wide here, huge moments on both the left and the right, all due to dirty air. You know, to me, he got offline a bit because Hadjar was where he wanted to be and he got on the marbles. I think that's what happened. I mean, of course there was dirty air, but I don't think it was that much. Remember that famous occasion when Alonso got penalised at Monza in the Renault in qualifying for impeding, I can't remember who it was now. It must have been a Ferrari, I guess. And he was like, I don't know, 200 meters in front of them going into the parabolica, and he was done for impeding and creating dirty air for the Ferrari. And he was penalised. Of course there's dirty air, but then everybody has dirty air, don't they? It's just like all this, I mean, Lewis definitely, you know, I think he drove well in the race when after he hit the poor groundhog, and there was damage in the car for sure. But I'm always not skeptical, but I'm always aware that when a driver has an incident like that and they nonetheless finish the race and they're reasonably quick, you've always got to think to yourself, well, I wonder what the underside of George Russell's car was like. Or I wonder what the underside of Kimi's car was like, or Max's for that matter. You'll probably find all of them have got damage. Not maybe to the same extent as Lewis, but most of those cars finished pretty battle scarred. And, you know, yeah, the Lewis did said it's a pretty good fastest lap. It's about 0.3 slower than he probably would have been, I guess. Apropos nothing at all, but we're just talking about the effect of dirty air and damage and stuff. And to me, as I say, Charles' thing, I'm slightly dubious about. Was it that much dirty air? I mean, if that dirty air created that much effect, then everybody would be going off all the time. It was ridiculous. And he had a big moment. I mean, he was on a very, very good lap, as I said in the video I've just done. You know, incredible first sector. And 19.7 it was, wasn't it? Compared with Lewis, it was 19.9 something, just in the first sector. And I suppose the trouble is that they get to see that. And Charles thinking, mega first sector, brake mega late into the second chicane. Oh, dirty air. Yeah, you know. Benzi's news showdown. Peter, did you ever meet or interact with P.L. Newman? Amazing he started learning to race for his 69 film winning, raced until 2005, Le Mans overall runner. Yeah, very, very, very cool guy, very good racing driver. Big unanswered question, who was the quicker driver, Steve McQueen or Paul Newman? Or James Dean for that matter. James actually won a race a couple of weeks before he was killed in 55. Won a race at Vegas, I think, a Vegas airstrip race meeting. And yeah, but Newman was good. He drove really ferocious cars as well, you know, massively 800 horsepower Datsuns and things like that. And, you know, really scary cars, in my opinion. Did I ever interact with him? Well, in 93, I spent most of the year with Nigel in America with Newman Haas, going to all the races and hanging out. So, yeah, I got to talk to him a bit. And I remember the last race of the year was at Laguna Seca. And there was a big Newman Haas barbecue near the water. And, you know, of course, Carl was there and Paul sort of turned up late-ish and left early-ish. But he was sort of everyone's speech. And he was very shy, Paul, I think, in real life. Well, he hated being a star outside what he did as a profession. You know, he was just the counterpoint to a lot of Grand Prix drivers. He just didn't want to be a part of Hollywood. He's just very quiet, nice guy. And he stood up and he said something, I'm absolutely paraphrasing now, but he stood there as the sun was going down. It was almost dark and you could hear the waves of the ocean and stuff. And he said, I'm here tonight and now I won't do the accent because I can't do justice to Paul Newman. He said, I'm here tonight because it's been a great season and I love my racing. And because of that, I've written a short poem. And it goes like this. We stood beside the water as the sun was going down. And that's as far as I've got with the poem, actually, so I can't read any more of it. I just walked off. And I just thought, wow, that's very classic, Paul. And yeah, what a good guy. What a great guy, actually. And he just, you know, put his money where his mouth was. He loved his racing. He put his money into Carl Haas, who was also a very, very nice man. I got on very well with Carl Haas. You know, not everybody's cup of tea, you know, always the cigar and the blessing of the car with the nose on the grid, which I kind of get. Pierre Gasly, I think, gets it as well. And he was very idiosyncratic. He wouldn't travel without his own pillow because he used to be, suffer from asthma, I think, things like that. And it was all over. But if you sat him down, he could tell you stories about the Bahamas Speed Week and Alfonso de Patago and Pedro and Ricardo Rodriguez and the Kinettis and just our Sierra brothers, just great racing guy. Just loved his racing, and is there anything better than that? And he did the Haas Formula One team 1.0, the Carl Haas Formula One team that Alan Jones and Patrick Tambay drove for with the Ford engines, involving, if you please, Ross Brawn, Neil Oatley. I think Adrian had something to do with it as well, if I'm correct. I may be wrong. Anyway, very good team. And he got this Beatrice Foods to sponsor it. And how did that come about? Oh, the guy that owned Beatrice Foods lived just down the road from Carl. That's how they met. Oh, I'm going to do a Formula One team. Would you like to sponsor it? Hey, yeah, great idea. That's how it all happened. Wonderful. They were the days, weren't they? Slipstream Merchant, what team do you think Max will race for in Le Mans when he eventually takes part? McLaren, Toyota, Porsche, Aston or Ferrari? Personally, I think he'll race Le Mans for Ferrari. Yeah, he'll go whatever's the best team at the time, won't he? Whatever that is. Hyundai, Hypercar. I don't know. It's good enough. I'm sure. I think he's quite good mates with Terry, actually, Terry Neville, and probably Terry will be doing a Hypercar at some point. Imagine that, Neville and Verstappen and Hyundai Hypercars. Bring it on. Then I might actually become a fan, I think, of WEC. Superior. Hi, Peter. What are your thoughts about McLaren's flexi floor? Ask Peter Wright, I think, would be my immediate reaction. If you haven't seen the video I did with Peter Wright talking about why the FIA new measurement regime in Spain produced absolutely no different result whatsoever, then Peter explains it quite well. What do I think about McLaren's flexi floor? If it's legal, it's legal. And if it's legal, probably everybody else is doing the same thing. That's all I can say. Because I can't see the floor flexing. I don't know what else to say, really, because we don't get to see the floors. There you go. Nick thinks, hi, Peter. Sorry you probably get asked all the time. If Michael did retire in 06, how would 07 and 08 look? Sorry for the probably ever asked question. Just watched the seasons recently. You mean at Mercedes? I think we just. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you're getting at. I think we'd probably think of Michael slightly differently, or do we? I mean, Michael now. When people think of Michael now, what do they think? Do they think that episode at Monaco when he crashed to ensure he got the pole, or do they think, his amazing string of wins with Ross Brawn at Ferrari and Jean Todt, or do they think Benetton and Senna, or do they think, the Mercedes years? I don't know. It depends where you came into Formula One and what you were watching at the time, I suppose. I don't think Michael drove as well at Mercedes as he did at Ferrari. And I don't think there's enough attention paid to how good a guy Michael was in many ways, and how fond he was of, say, Felipe Massa, and how he helped Felipe's career, and Rubens for that matter. So, and he probably got Irvine the drive there, I would imagine. So, I don't know. It depends how you see Michael. I tend to think of Michael as the guy that adopted the stray dog in Brazil, called it Flea because it was full of fleas, and brought it back to Germany. That's the Michael I think of when I think of Michael. I also think of talking to Sam Bird, who was a big mate of Michael's, in Michael's last year at Mercedes, about Michael in Canada after Friday practice, rushing down to find Sam wherever he was in the motorhome, whatever. I think Sam was a third driver for Mercedes or whatever, sim driver, and wanting Sam to go skydiving with him that afternoon. He's just driven a Formula One car all day, and then he wants to go skydiving. That's another Michael I remember. And I suppose the other Michael is Michael who loved the American West and horse riding and being a cowboy. Good stuff. If I could I would love to go to Montana area to the Little Bighorn and around there, just at various times of the year, the winter and the summer, just to experience what that was like. I love that part of the United States. I think I do. I've never been there, but I would love it. Cheyenne particularly because, as Wyoming, isn't it? Because I grew up with Cheyenne Bodie, Clint Walker. that was just, it still is, absolutely brilliant TV show with a very nice message to every episode as well. Cheyenne. Besmir Marku. Hi, Peter. And Bronco, actually, for that matter. Ty Harden. Orison Whipple Hungerford Jr., his real name. Besmir Marku. Hi, Peter. Hope all's well. Let's play. I give you $1 billion to build a team. Pick. Team principal. Technical director. 2 drivers. Location. Engine supplier. And main sponsor and colours. Well, I think these days, $1 billion has to go to the FIA and all the teams, doesn't it, to let you have the entry. So we're already down, split the budget 50% straight away. Then I think I'd go with a Ferrari engine, only because I think Ferrari have such great cachet around the world. And you know what? I would do another attempt to do it in America, because I still think the American technology is there to do a Grand Prix team, no problem at all. Obviously, base the team in Europe. A little bit as Andretti will be doing, for sure, as Andretti will be doing. So I'll be another rival to Andretti, I guess. And technical director, oof, I don't know. It's a very difficult one, isn't it? I would take a technical director who people aren't talking about very much, who I think do a pretty good job. And I would get very good race engineers and engineers around him that I know. Drivers, wow. I don't know. I'm going to need to think about this one and come back to you. I'd have one American driver for sure. And I don't know who that would be at this stage. But, I would definitely have a young American driver in one car. And in the other car, I don't know, maybe somebody like, give them some confidence, somebody like Felipe Drugovich, or maybe Pierre Gasly. I think if Pierre was in a good team where they really rated him and he had a great car, I think he could win Grand Prix. I think he's very quick, Gasly. So, yeah, lots going on there. Main sponsor and colours. Well, I'd go back to my original Williams colours of the dark blue stripe, red and white at the bottom and yellow at the top, which was the colour scheme we did for the 85 10B, 10 and 10B, and then the 11 and the straight on. And we won it with it was a bit different with the 14, but it was basically the same. So very nice. That's what I would do. I love that colour scheme that we did then. Time Pod, where were you in 92? Well, I was team manager, race and test team manager at Williams, 54 people I was responsible for. And when we weren't racing, we were testing. So it was a bit like being in the army, non-stop, very early risers, very late nights. And as Colin Waddy Watts said, if you can do your buttons up on the shirt Monday morning, you haven't been working hard enough, because your fingers should be completely swollen and destroyed. And yeah, it was a tough time, but equally we had a good result that year and won the championship. Kichi Mantri. What would be your team driver lineup if you were to choose drivers from the current grid? It'd be amazing to know who you were picking. I like Isaac Hadjar, actually. I like his approach. It reminds me a lot of Alan Prost, not only in stature, but also in the way he is. He's sort of a nice blend of being quite emotional, but being very, very good and understanding what he needs to do. I've got quite a soft spot for him, I think. So, I'd like to work with Isaac Hadjar. I don't know. Let me think. I'd have Leclerc and Hadjar, I think. I think Leclerc's a really interesting guy. And I love the way he's had to overcome so much, disappointment and tragedy in the early part of his life. And I think he's a class act. He just needs to get rid of all the emotion that's built up inside him over the years at Ferrari. And I would see that as a challenge, and just to get him to sort of get in and really just enjoy his racing and think clearly and go out there. And who else? I mean, there's so many quick drivers these days. You know, you'd be crazy. I mean, if Max or George were available, you'd go for them. If Oscar was available, you'd go for him for sure. Let me think. Jack Doohan, I'd have somewhere in the fold, I think, somewhere milling around. Yeah, give him a go. So yeah, lots. It'd be good fun to do that. Everybody keeps asking all this. Gets me all sweaty thinking, oh yeah, wouldn't it be great to do that? Anyway, ain't going to happen. But fun thinking about it. Thank you. Musa Minguni. It's his little perks, Peter, that throws in that makes these live streams special. Who would have thought Honda had that issue? Yeah, with the manifolds. Well, they had plenty of issues. And another issue was the Honda cap and Frank's agreement that all the drivers would wear Honda caps on the podium if they're in the top three, even though he had a contract with Goodyear to say that they wear Goodyear caps. That was another story. Imagine the punch-ups we used to have after the race, after the podium ceremonies with Honda on that one. That particular point was very difficult. So there we go. So yeah, okay. Ricard Zubimendi Phillips says Peter would pick Max and Charles for his team driver lineup. No doubt about it. Yeah, well, if they're available, I would. I'm just reading because it looks like when somebody asked me about comparing Raikkonen with Rosberg, I assumed it was Keke Rosberg, but they meant Nico Rosberg. So I'm just going to answer that question now, comparing Kimi with Nico. Kimi with Nico Rosberg. Nico would have scored massive points because of his intelligence and ability to maximize the latest in technology available to the driver in a very systematic, logical, practical way. And Kimi, by contrast, would have thought, nah, I'm not interested. I'll just drive the race car. In terms of absolute style and finesse, Kimi, a bit more of a short corner driver, better on the rear of the car. Nico, very soft touch, as soft as Lando, but not quite as short a corner as Kimi or Max, but very, very good. Opposite to his father in some ways. His father was just an overseer merchant, as I said. But yeah, apologies if I misread that. It's just that for me, if I think of Rosberg, I always think of Keke. You probably did say Nico, but I was immediately thinking Keke because for me, he's the real Rosberg in some ways. You know, he was the fiery Finn. So another one from Kajit Mantri. The drivers nowadays compared to the old drivers, what do you think has changed? Well, if you compare a guy like Max with a guy like Yoken Rint, I don't think a lot has changed. I think they're very similar in the way they approach their racing and how single-minded they were in terms of not being that interested in all the rubbish going on around them, and the way they thought about their racing in a fairly simple way. So that's the 1970s compared with today. If you think of a guy like Nigel, I think he's quite similar to the way Max thinks as well. Very easy to they both of them dilute all the complicated stuff down to very simple, manageable things that they know correctly are the most important things on which to focus, which Nigel could do very well, as Max does very well. And if you want to go back further to Jim Clark, I think it was a similar thing. You know, I think Jimmy was able not to have to worry too much about all the extraneous stuff and just wanted to focus 100% on that day, that car, that race, and making the car as drivable as he could for the lap time that he knew he could get out of it. Same way Max does. So I don't think a lot has changed amongst the great drivers. I think amongst the midfield, a lot has changed, because if you think of a guy like, I don't know, Trevor Taylor, Jimmy's teammate for a while in Formula One, pretty much forgotten, pretty much the number 2 at Lotus, and was then left to kind of fade away with his career. Then you compare him with, say, I don't know, Liam Lawson, and Liam's, you know, looks like the cool Red Bull dude, even though he's midfield and getting blown away by Isaac Hadjar. You know, there's nothing for Liam to feel satisfied at the moment, and yet, because of the whole Red Bull branding thing, he looks like a very cool Formula One driver in town, and that's the difference. I think that difference between then and now has affected the midfield more than the top of the grid, and because of that, I don't think guys like Liam Lawson are as self-critical as they should be, because they kind of get to feel, well, you know, they all think I'm a superstar already. I probably am. So it doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't mean to say that he is. Kentris Matris says, Fred is the best team principal I've ever seen at Ferrari. Really? Really? I find that quite hard to believe. Better than Daniel Odetto? Better than John Todd? Better than Ross Brawn? Better than Roberto Nozzetto? I find that, yeah, I wouldn't have said he's good, but I don't think he's the best at Ferrari, in my opinion. Boracic Time says, maybe Newey didn't want to go to Ferrari. Well, of course he didn't. That's why he didn't go. But then, you know, did he really want to go to Aston Martin? No, they persuaded him to go because of the money, and it's around the corner and it's everything that he wanted. But Ferrari could have done the deal. Whatever it took, they should have done it. That's, you know, whether they had to set up a completely new design department in the UK, as they had to when they got John Barnard, whatever it took, they should have done it. That's my point. And Ferrari can afford to do that. It's that important. Of course, he obviously didn't want to go to Ferrari because I don't know the reasons. I'm just guessing. Maybe Aston Martin offered more money. Maybe it would have involved living in Italy, a lot of travel to and fro to Europe, which he didn't want to do. Maybe when he suggested that he brought in a team of engineers that he wanted to work with, Ferrari thought, well, we're not going to replace all our current team just because Adrian tells us to. You know, again, that's a soluble problem. All of those things are soluble, but because Ferrari just gave up at that point. So there you go. Yeah, Jonathan is the clam guy. Takes things simple yet smartly. That's Jonathan Wheatley. But not many people were talking about Jonathan Wheatley when he was at Red Bull, were they? They're all talking about him now. But he wasn't getting a lot of credit for what he was doing at Red Bull, and he was doing a lot at Red Bull. And I've always had time for him. And Mr. Bungle says, missing out on Newey and getting a 40-year-old Hamilton next to Leclerc is the worst thing Freddy Vasseur has done. Slipstream Merchant says, I think Ferrari signing Hamilton over Newey was a boardroom decision, not a Vasseur decision. I think you may well be right. The boardroom might have said, look, Fred, whatever you say, we want Lewis Hamilton. But then again, this is where Toto Wolff has done such a good job with the Mercedes board over the years. What do boards know about Formula One? The team principal's job is not only to run the Formula One team, it's to make sure that the board who control the team, if you like, are told what is the right way to go, and how you manage the board is part of your job. And if you know that the right thing for the team is to get Adrian Newey, you put your life on the line for that in front of the board and you make it happen. You don't give in to the board. What do the board know about Formula One? And that's, you know, maybe that's where Freddy Vasseur's problem is, you know, whereas Toto Wolff is the ultimate politician and can feel that. And if he says, no, we have to pay Lewis Hamilton this amount, this is what he's worth, and we've got to keep him, or we've got to get George Russell, whatever it is, or we've got to have more money for the engine, whatever he's trying to persuade them to do, he gets it. Full credit to Toto for that. I've always said that's his greatest quality. Very difficult thing to do. And that's where Fred presumably failed. I think you're absolutely right. I think the board was, you know, quite prepared to overrule Fred and get Lewis, or maybe not get Adrian. But Fred should have stuck to what was correct. That's the job of the team principal in that situation. So, yeah, we're going to have to wind it up pretty soon, guys. Got another 5 minutes. R. Sidigar, Mr. Windsor, would Audi still pursue their ambition to Formula One, as there will be Cadillac or perhaps Toyota in the form of their Gazoo branding? Thanks as always for the interesting insight. Yeah, Audi, well, I haven't heard that Audi are not going to do Formula One. They seem to be doing more and more. They've got Very good. Excuse me, it's just about to sneeze. Excuse me. Audi are in Formula One. Yeah, you know, they're doing that new thing in England where they're generating engineering talent. I mean, that's another word for let's design the car in the UK and run it, not run it from there, but design it there with good English talent, British talent. I think that's what Jonathan Wheatley's trying to do there. And I think, you know, the Audi brand seems to be embracing Formula One and going into Formula One. And so, yeah, they're happening. Will Toyota come in? Maybe. Come in again? Will they return to Formula One? Maybe. They're doing a lot of good things at the moment, Toyota, aren't they? In rallying, and well, they were doing a great job in WEC. And so they might do it. I'd be surprised if Toyota do, because there's quite a lot to lose if they do it. But let's see. And who was the other team? Cadillac. Well, yeah, you know, that's the whole Mario Andretti, Michael Andretti, get us into Formula One on the back of the manufacturer, which is good. You know, good for them. As I say, I'm not a fan of manufacturers in Formula One per se. I don't think it's the answer. I think the answer would have been to have produced a better show with less complicated and expensive power units and had an electric championship as part of the Formula One race card. That's, as I said at the beginning of the video, that would have been my solution. So let's have a look. Mr. Bungle says, Canada made me so upset. They had the pace to win, I think. I think he's talking about Ferrari. And yeah, I was upset too, because I think they did have the pace. And we saw that Sector 1 Q3 for Charles Leclerc, you know, before it all went away. Dirty air. What are we doing here? Box says, if that was up to me, I'd have put some decent, cheap enough driver like Nico Hulkenberg, as in price, not pace, and spent the save money on Newey and Alpha Corse, on AF Corsa to bring them trackside at Formula One. Well, yeah, that's not a bad solution, is it? You know, we're saying AF Corsa, who run the WEC team, trackside operations. Okay, you know, maybe not, but let's see how it goes. Run somebody like Nico Hulkenberg alongside Charles Leclerc and spend all the money on Adrian Newey. Yeah, well, it's kind of what I've been saying, you know. Well, they keep Carlos Sainz, you know, at least they knew the guy. So, Sarosh Soman says, your video explaining the difference between Hamilton and Leclerc on the minimum speed comparison and exit speed comparison was brilliant. Prost onboards, it was as if he halts the car to zero and then accelerates. Nigel Mansell too. Carlos Reutemann too. Jim Clark too. You know, a lot of them. Alan Prost. You know, as you say, I mean, that famous story when I took Frank Williams out the back at Zandvoort and he said, well, when's Prost going to do his quick lap? I said, he's just done it, Frank. He's on the pole. Really? I didn't see it. I missed it. No, you didn't. You were watching, but you didn't look quick. Well, there you go. That's the point. And so it is, you know, it's minimum speed. And it's a great, I often smile when those graphics come up on screen, you know, minimum speed, fastest through turn 7. And you see all these speeds. You think, oh, well, he's going to be slow. And they surely are, you know, because you don't want a high minimum speed. Generally, you want a low minimum speed. You want to gain the speed into the corner by extending the straight. Then you want a nice rotation at exactly the right rate, exactly the right timing, exactly the right use of steering, throttle and brakes. And then you want a straight exit. That involves quite a low minimum speed. But minimum speed doesn't matter. Now, one proviso I should put on that video is that the teams have GPS telemetry. I don't have access to GPS telemetry for every car. I rely on the telemetry that's put out by Formula One, and it is digital, and therefore the difference between 122 kilometers an hour and 144 kilometers an hour is the difference between 2 points. And obviously between those 2 points, there is a rate of change, not all of which is identified by the digital telemetry of Formula One. All you can do is look at one specific point and see what car A is doing at that point versus car B at that point. Now it could be that just before that, or just after that point, car B is also getting the same speed as car A. But nonetheless, the trend is there. The trend is there that car A is quicker than car B, and that gap does get closer as you're accelerating through the gears up to 6th gear from 3rd. But and nonetheless, those numbers for those specific points are 100% accurate. But I need to add that rider, and that's, you know, it's sad that we don't get in these days the GPS telemetry that we know is out there. But anyway, it's just my way of saying I wish we had it. This is for another super chat. Thank you very much. Nice color. Pink. Hi Peter. Do you think Max can win in Austria? Yeah, I do. I think Austria is a bit of a, dare I say, a lottery, because it's a racetrack in inverted commas. So, you know, you can pass a little bit there. You can have moments. Other guys can hit curbs at the wrong moment. They can run wide. All sorts of sort of racy things happen in Austria. And so, you know, it would only take Max to qualify, say, top 3, to be in reasonable shape to win that Grand Prix, give or take a bit of strategy, a bit of errors from people in front, maybe he having a clean race for a change, all those things, and he could win it. But it'll be a messy weekend, I predict, in terms of things that will happen during the race. It'll be quite messy. It won't be a sort of straightforward race in the way that we normally have Grand Prix. Not that many of them have been straightforward recently, but it's a sort of, you know, speed bowl of a circuit where it's just designed for close wheel-to-wheel racing. Equally, you know, hate to say it, Max could be out first lap, somebody else hits him or something, you know. It's that sort of racetrack. David Brown says, next year we have Formula One, Cadillac, Ferrari and Audi. Any idea what they will name the teams? You mean what sponsors they will have? Not really, no. I'm assuming Audi want to have their name in there. Oh, sorry. Formula One, Cadillac, Ferrari and Audi, Ferrari. What they will name the team? Well, I think they'll be Cadillac and Audi, won't they? I mean, Aston Martin have no compunction calling themselves Aston Martin, even though they're Aston Martin Mercedes. I always call them Aston Martin Mercedes, and Aston Martin try to put all their press releases, they never seem to mention Mercedes, which I think is wrong, actually. I think they should have to mention Mercedes. They can't be bothered to build their own engine. They should mention the engine supplier. And same goes with Williams. Well, everybody really, you know, Sauber, Ferrari. So I think they should be, you know, Cadillac, Ferrari and Audi, Ferrari. Yeah. In the same that we have Williams, Mercedes and Aston Martin, Mercedes and McLaren, Mercedes. In the early days when I worked at Autocar as a sports editor, the style actually was to put the engine supplier before the chassis supplier. So it was always Cosworth Lotus or Matra Ligier, you know, and that'd be quite funny today if they did that. No, that would take the wind out of the sails of Lawrence Stroll if he had to call his team Mercedes Aston Martin. So there you go. Where are we? Mr. Bungle said, if Ferrari get anyone, it should be Christian Horner or someone in Formula One already. Look at Sauber already improving with Wheatley. Well, that's the point. You know, Wheatley was an untapped seam of gold in what he was doing at Red Bull with all that experience and knowledge, and nobody was taking any interest in him. And there you go. You know, the great call by Sauber to get him. And that's why I wouldn't say necessarily Christian would be the right guy for Ferrari, because he's kind of been there, done that. I think you want somebody a little bit like Jonathan Wheatley at Ferrari, who's going to be perhaps more imaginative in the way you go about things. Somebody like Tom McCullough, for example. Let's have a look. Sorash Soman, I'm going to make this the last one, guys. Do you think we can have data on loads that the driver is putting and making a ratio by what minimum speed, which would give the viewers? No, I don't. I don't think the teams would ever want us to have that. And I don't know that actually, I mean, I'm sure that information's out there. Do you think every team actually uses all that information? If they did, I think you'd see guys like Liam Lawson improving, wouldn't you? That's just just as an aside. But no, I don't. I think the teams try to make sure that as little information goes out to the general public as possible, and the FIA monitor that by putting out as much as they can, but it's not that extensive. Why don't we get, you know, steering input, for example? We don't, and that's wrong. So we'll never get, in the same way, they should, long ago, they should have had a rule in the technical regulations that the footwell area needs to be defined by the space we need in order to have the lighting and the fixture points for an onboard camera in the footwell area. They never do that because the team say, oh no, we don't want to do that, ruin the shape of the chassis, can't do that, aerodynamic reasons, whatever. Why? You know, why not have the footwell area? How many people have watched the, you know, the famous video of Walter Roll with footwell and hand and everything else when he's driving a Quattro, I think. And, you know, it's brilliant because you got the footwell. Formula One, we don't get the footwell. We do periodically, but it's very perfunctory and not very well coordinated. We don't see it for long enough. As I say, in that video, I said in that video that I've just done that to me, this Formula One movie has already got a bad downside, and that is that it looks as if the direction of the Formula One live coverage is trying to be a bit more Hollywood in line with the movie, immersive, whatever that is. And instead of just showing us proper shots of the cars and being enabling us and magnifying from their point of view, because it's a great story, the differences between the style of the drivers, they're showing us all these low down shots which come to naught. And there are huge differences. Going into turn one in Austria, I can tell you now, there will be huge differences between Liam Lawson and Max Verstappen. Why not see that? But they don't. They'll never show that. They'll just show some sort of abstract graphic to do with speeds on slow corners or medium speed corners or whatever it is, which mean nothing. And we lost it all. Anyway, there we are, guys. Thank you so much. You know what I was going to do? I was a bit concerned when I started the live stream that normally there's quite a lot of people in the chat box, and there weren't that many initially. I mean, a massive number now. Thank you very much for doing that. But I had my hand ready in case there weren't that many questions. I had a copy of Jim Clark at the wheel, the amended version with 1965 Indy in it. And I was going to, if there weren't that many questions, I was actually going to read Jimmy's short chapter on winning the Indy 500 in 65, because in the background of all this 75 years of Formula One, we should not forget, this is also the year anniversary, 60 years since Jim Clark won the World Championship, Formula One, and the Indy 500 in the same year, which meant missing Monaco. Indeed, I'm actually going to finish, I'm just thinking about it now, I'm going to finish with Jimmy's assessment of why he decided to do that. He says, in these spring months of the 65 season, I was faced with a certain amount of drama, which was fully reported and which I don't wish to dwell upon here, namely, whether I should race at Monaco in the Monaco Grand Prix or take part at Indianapolis in the legendary 500. As Indy is such a long drawn-out affair, and as Lotus were taking part, I started to practice for the American race many weeks before, flying back and forth to America at fairly regular intervals. Finally, when it was confirmed that I could not do both races, I opted for Indianapolis, and again there was a great deal of comment about this in the press. Though the inference was there, no one came right out and said what most people appeared to think, namely that the money talked me into doing Indy. The fact of the matter is that I almost didn't go to Indianapolis at all. What decided me was that Lotus were going to compete at Indy whether I drove or not, due to their contract with Ford. I also knew the time and effort needed to run at Indy in the 500, and if Colin Chapman was going to spend all that time to do the race properly, he was not going to be able to put a similar effort into the Monaco race. So I chose to run at Indianapolis. Isn't that interesting? He was, you know, there was a big decision process going on. And because you just assume, well, he just did it because it was logical. But it was obviously a big thing in his mind and Lotus' mind to do that. And to miss Monaco, a race he'd never won, even though he'd always been unbelievably quick there, even in Formula 3, Formula Junior, whatever, he never won it. But he forsook that chance. And as it happened, Graham Hill won Monaco that year, probably the greatest win of his career, when he fell foul of Bob Anderson's slow-moving Brabham on about lap 20-odd when he was leading, and had to go up the escape road at the chicane, and stalled the car and got out of his BRM, 3-point turned it on his own, and then jump-started it on the slight downhill incline, drove back into the race, no seatbelts in those days, and won the race. Amazing. That was almost as amazing as Jim Clark's achievement of winning Indy and Formula One in the same year. Anyway, there we go. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for watching, and See you all soon. Maybe another live stream for Austria. And then we got the double header, haven't we? Maybe, I don't know, is it always a triple header? I don't know, lost track. But anyway, it's Austria, not this weekend, but the next weekend. And it's all happening, isn't it? 'Cause it's the same weekend. It's the Acropolis Rally and the Jim Clark celebrations up in Scotland. Nothing happening this weekend so far as motor racing in my world is concerned. And yet all happening next weekend, all clashing. So it's annoying, really. Why don't they all get together and decide when to put things on so that they don't clash? Anyway, there we go. Take care. See you soon.